Hello, this is Dr. Moore, and in this video, I'm talking about waste reduction.
In a previous video, we talked about what happens to our garbage. Either it is buried in a landfill or burned in an incinerator, and neither of these is an ideal solution. So, what can we do to reduce the amount of landfilling and trash burning we're doing? Here's what we can do: reduce, reuse, recycle. These are ordered, by the way, from the best option to the worst option. Before we run through each of the options, remember this. Every product that you buy requires the extraction of raw materials, the production of a product from those raw materials, distribution of that product, and eventually the disposal of that product. And every one of these steps causes some amount of environmental degradation. Reducing our consumption is the most powerful thing we can do to preserve our planet's resources. When we don't buy something, we eliminate the environmental degradation associated with every step in the flowchart. Reusing is the second best option. When we reuse a product, we put off the degradation associated with its disposal. Now, let's talk about recycling. If you are like most people I know, putting something in the recycling bin makes you feel like this. Oh yeah, I recycled. I love the planet. I'm a good person. Recycling is better than throwing your trash out of a car window, and it's better than sending it to a landfill or an incinerator. But even in a perfect world where everything you put in a recycling bin gets recycled, recycling should be the last resort. When we recycle, we eliminate the costs associated with disposal, but it can be expensive and energy intensive to reprocess our wastes into new products. And we don't live in a perfect world. Now, I know a lot of you think that whatever you put into a recycling bin will be lovingly returned to nature by well-intentioned fairies. But that's not what really happens. Let me tell you what a recycling bin is. A recycling bin is a bin for trash that you are going to try to sell. What you put in a recycling bin only gets recycled if somebody is willing to buy your trash and then recycle it. Now, usually there are pretty robust markets for metals like aluminum and steel, and even paper can be recycled pretty effectively. But plastic, nobody wants to buy your dirty plastic. The whole appeal of plastic as a material is that it's cheap. What businessman would want to go through the trouble of reclaiming your dirty plastic when they can get the virgin materials for less money? That's why less than 10% of all of the plastic ever produced has been recycled. Most of it gets landfilled or incinerated, and of course, a significant amount of it has ended up in the environment. And here's the really diabolical part. Since the 1980s, the plastics industry has spent millions of dollars promoting recycling, even though they knew recycling plastic would never be economically viable. They did this because they wanted consumers to feel okay about the amount of plastic they were consuming. The reason you feel so good about recycling is because the plastics industry wants you to feel so good. So instead of making you feel like this, I'd argue that recycling should make you feel like this.
I'm sorry. I failed. And the only consolation I can give you is the remote possibility that you might be recycled.
And while I'm ranting, let's talk about aspirational recycling. Aspirational recycling is when people recycle things that shouldn't be recycled in hopes that they will be recycled. I think this all goes back to our doe-eyed belief that the recycling fairies will just roll their eyes at our silliness and take care of it. But that's not how recycling works. When you put things in a recycling bin that shouldn't be in the recycling bin, you're contaminating the recycling. You're making it less likely that somebody would want to buy that recycling and making it more likely that the whole load will end up in a landfill or an incinerator. Luckily, there is a rhyme to help with the problem of aspirational recycling. It goes like this. When in doubt, leave it out. Easy. So, recycling is a nice idea, but the reality is a lot less rosy than the plastics industry has led you to believe. which is why reducing and reusing are so important. Okay, we're going to take a hard pivot here and talk about something that doesn't begin with R, and that is composting. Composting is a great solution for our organic wastes like kitchen scraps or yard trimmings or even paper. We can allow these organic materials to decompose in controlled or semi-controlled conditions, and they'll form a material called compost, which can be used as a fertilizer in our gardens and in our fields. Composting can be done at an industrial scale or in a bucket underneath your kitchen sink. You just want to choose a setup that will keep odors down and keep pests out. I know I inserted a lot of myself into this video, so let's recap the most important APES learning objectives covered here. First, recycling and composting reduce the need for landfills and trash incinerators. Recycling reprocesses waste for use in new products. But recycling is energy intensive and it can be costly. Composting is allowing organic wastes like food, yard trimmings, and paper to decompose, forming compost, which can be used as a fertilizer. But composting can smell bad and attract pests.